Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the We're Not Stumped podcast. I'm your host, Mike Bolland, and today we're going to spotlight someone turning challenges into triumphs. And today's guest is Caitlin Connor, and she's the definition of resilience. After a motorcycle accident that took her leg and discovering she was pregnant soon after, she chose to fight, adapt, and thrive. She delivered a healthy baby girl, became a multi-sport athlete, and founded something we're going to talk about today, Be More Adaptive. And that's to empower people to live without limits. First of all, Caitlin, thank you so much for being a guest on the We're Not Stumped podcast.
Thanks for having me.
No, I can't wait. We just had about a 20-minute pre-conversation, which I always do, but it's so fun to learn more about the people that are on. And you're doing so many great things that I'm just so impressed. I can't wait to talk about them. But first of all, I'd like the audience to learn a little bit more about you. We always start the podcast with a segment I call In Your Own Words. So yeah, I'd like the audience to learn more about you.
Yeah, so let's see, what year is it? I don't even feel like I know what year it is anymore. I've been an amputee for over 11 years, lost my leg in a motorcycle accident, but had a lot of loss and trauma kind of circle that incident at the same time. I lost my brother pretty close to it. My mother-in-law got cancer, died a year after, and then my mom got cancer and died 2 years after. Like, all these things were happening. And my ex was also in the accident with me. He's okay. Don't worry. That's usually the next question is what happened to him, but he's okay. Um, and that's how we started our marriage, which then turned into two of us leaving the hospital in our wheelchairs. And also at the same time, finding out that I was 4 weeks pregnant. And so now I have a beautiful 10-year-old little girl. She's in school. She better be in school. And yeah, so she's become so much of my reason of just trying to be a good human being and just a decent parent. And she just 100% is the reason I try to do things. Sometimes she's tired of me. That's okay. We're moving into the preteen stage. But she's my world. So
And you said that you both left in a wheelchair, but I know you left obviously without part of you. What was that like? What was that experience like?
just I was in so much shock right after the accident that it took me 2 years to realize I even had PTSD from the accident. To this day, still, if cars come to the left or right of me very quickly, it will trigger a response. But he broke his hip all the way down the right side, fractured his sacrum, and broke his femur. Like, he had things happen too. Um, and yeah, we were literally going to go have kind of the first meal post chemo and radiation with his mom to just to go celebrate her wanting to eat a meal again. If you know anything about cancer, it really messes up your taste buds. Food becomes almost like the enemy. And yeah, that was kind of like, okay, it's the last day before it really turns into a hot Texas summer. Let's hop on the bike, go for a ride. And that was just something we enjoyed together. And it was the day before my birthday. We were supposed to go ride roller coasters the next day. And I still haven't really been on roller coasters since, not like the big ones. I'm not afraid of roller coasters. I still love them. It's just an inconvenience to go to all these places, and maybe they'll let you on the ride, maybe they won't. So yeah, I will tell you, he did have a blast when we were in like a grocery store and he was in the automated carts, because then he could follow closely behind me and wait till I was distracted looking into an aisle where I paused so he could just ram into me. He thought that was great. So
That's a little interesting story there.
he's a comedian.
I'm sorry?
He's a bit of a comedian.
When did you realize, though? Was it immediate that you knew you'd lost your leg? Did they try to save it? How did that story go?
I knew immediately. I sat up at the scene of the accident. I stayed conscious the whole time until literally landing on the rooftop of the hospital, and I had severed an artery and lost 75% of my ankle at impact. So it was a partial amputation. And as soon as I saw it, I looked at it and I was like, "Oh, guess I'm just gonna lay here." Fortunately for me, I had EMT basic training prior to that. It didn't go into the career, but I definitely had the knowledge base, which is why I call it, you know, not a natural response, but an educated response, that the next thing I did was actually calm down and slow down my breathing. So probably saved a lot of my limb just by not freaking out and, essentially pushing out more blood. So, then it was okay. I'm just going to wait for help. And help came so quickly. I just was very fortunate. We had a cop in the nearby parking lot. The fire department was 5 minutes away. Like, that stuff really matters in emergencies. And so, yeah, and then my ex was taken to a completely different hospital. So we started out not knowing if the other was okay. I didn't have my ID on me, so I didn't have a name in the hospital for a week. So until, I could be located, by family, my ex thought I was dead. He wasn't sure if I was alive. He certainly didn't know I was pregnant, neither did I. And so the first time I got to call him, he was just crying, just blubbering on the phone, and then I broke it to him that we were pregnant, because I woke up in ICU, and that was kind of the first thing they told me was, "Oh, by the way, you're pregnant." And I'm like, "Oh, I'm gonna go back to sleep now," because that's a lot of information to wake up to. I'd been in surgery like 6.5 hours, and then all my family's standing there, so it was really kind of just shocked coming out of anesthesia and seeing people that I knew from way South Texas. I mean, they were 4 hours away, so they'd been sitting probably for a couple hours in ICU just waiting. But, yeah, it was quite a shocking moment.
So you do have your family and maybe the friends you were saying from hours away, but there is those times when you're laying in the hospital and you're by yourself. And I know there's people that might be listening to this podcast, maybe in the same situation or a similar situation. How did you mentally move forward from day to day? What did you tell yourself?
Yeah, and it was really interesting, because as soon as I found out I was pregnant, we were trying to get pregnant. That wasn't the surprise. Once we found out his mom had cancer, we're like, all right, let's speed this up a bit. So for us, it was all the timing we were looking for. We just didn't expect the accident. Um, as soon as I knew I was pregnant, I kind of went into a mental block where I just shut out a lot of things. I knew that any kind of negative feelings would probably impact myself and possibly the womb. It's my first time being a mom. I just was like, okay, well, I can't take all this information at once. And I shut down. The first week, my mom stayed with me, the second, my dad. And in that first week, my mom let everybody and their grandmother come into that room. And I was so, so tired of visitors. So if anyone's listening and they're a family member, please just let them rest. For the love of whatever you believe in, please let them rest,
Wow.
because throughout the night you're being bothered, woken up constantly by nurses and doctors, and, you have vital signs being taken. And I was going in and out of surgeries. I had 7 surgeries total, while pregnant, with minimal anesthesia,
Wow.
pain meds and medication. And antibiotics. So I was so tired, and I was just let me sleep. So by the end of the week, I was so frustrated. I was just like, I wasn't even thinking about the leg yet. I wasn't even there. I was just frustrated that I couldn't get any rest. And then the next week, my dad stayed with me. I told him, like, I don't want anybody in this room. Just let me sleep. And I just remember the curtains being real dark, and just like, I didn't want to see anybody. Um, but at one point, he decided to get a container of Nutella, and he would only eat it with a straw. And I almost killed my dad that day, because the sound that he was making with that straw, I was like, get out of the room. I'm like, why don't you use a spoon like a normal person? He got a kick out of that. But don't worry, dad's still alive. So so yeah, it was stressful. And I even had a stalker in the accident. Somebody that was an onlooker in traffic got really attached to me, not both of us, literally just me. And I had to kind of basically get the cops involved, and blacklist myself so that nobody would find me in the hospital. It was a whole ordeal. It really was. It was
Yeah,
just one more thing I didn't need to think about. Is
I don't know if you
well,
want to talk about that one. That's interesting. I didn't
yeah.
read.
So okay. So when the accident happened, I stopped rolling, and I look up, and And I yell so that traffic stops. And then I'm like, all right, time to lay down and breathe, right? Because I needed to be calm. And then there's a woman that came up that came and started helping me, and she was freaking out, man. She was about to pass herself out. I was like, "You can calm down. I've already seen it. I know the condition, but if you don't chill, you're gonna pass out, and then both of us need help." And so then this guy comes up, and I can feel him. I'd already sat up and I'd laid down and I was holding my C-spine, holding my neck in place and just not moving, right? Because that was the one time we didn't wear a helmet. So it could have been a spinal cord injury on top of it, which luckily it wasn't. But I could feel him pick up my head and his hands were just shaking. And by then, another nurse had come and she tied the tourniquet, the nurse did. And because the first woman was freaking out crying, so she took off her bra to tie a tourniquet, and I thought that was amazing. I was like, "Oh my god, everybody needs a wire bra in their car for tourniquet instead of just tourniquet." I don't know why. Anyways, nurse ties the tourniquet. This guy picks up my head, and he's quivering, and I'm conscious, so I'm like, "Can you stop moving my head?" And so then the other two ladies just like yell at him. They're like, "Stop, chill." So he's just kind of still freaking out, and um, so then fire department comes, takes me away, right? Well, he shows up in the waiting room. I don't know how he knew to look for me, to find me. Somebody gave him enough information to find me in the hospital. And so he's in the waiting room telling my whole family that he had ripped off his shirt to make a tourniquet and save my life. And I'm like, buddy, I was conscious. It took me a couple days to come out of shock to understand what he was telling them, though. So while he's there, who's getting everybody's phone numbers and he's texting my family, constantly asking for updates. He made a second Facebook page where he was only talking about me. Again, his focus was only on me, not also my ex, who was also very, very hurt. And just remember him saying, I don't have enough gas. I can't go to the hospital to see her today. And I'm like, this is so weird. And I'm just slowly over a couple days putting all the pieces of the puzzle together. And then once they tell me what they were telling him, I was like, no, that's not how it happened. Like, I remember everything that happened until I was essentially in the surgical room. And so then it was odd because he was driving by my in-laws' house and they lived like a couple doors down, and he was asking them where I was. And I was like, nope, we've gone too far. We lived across from the police department. And so the cop that was near in the accident, I got his phone number and stayed in contact. And so I asked my uncle, who did identity checks at the time, to run his like truck type and his name and everything. And he had a warrant out for his
Oh
arrest.
boy.
It wouldn't tell me what for. And at that point I didn't care anyways. But then I was like texting the cop and I was like, "Hey, you got this stalker outside your PD that's looking for me, and he's got a warrant out for his arrest. Please do something with it." So um, and then everybody, after sending some really crass messages to him, blocked him, and then everybody, disengaged entirely. And that's when I blacklisted. I was like, I don't want anybody to find me. This is too much to deal with. On
So you're going
top
through,
of,
yeah, you're going
yeah,
through everything you're going through physically and mentally, and then you have this
this one
bozo.
extra piece, just an extra thing to have to worry about.
That's
Yeah, and so
wow.
yeah, and so we were in separate hospitals, and we had to keep track with each other on the phone, and our families are going kind of back and forth, engaging both of us. And then, finding out I was pregnant. I mean, making that decision, do I take full medication? Do I not? It's that's my decision to make. I've had a nonprofit specifically try to turn my story into something else for their own profit, and they refuse to take it off their website. To this day, still won't take it off the website, still there. So for me, I just always tell people this was my story and my situation, and this was the decision process that I had. But yeah.
Wow, a lot more to that story that I didn't read that other part. So thank you for sharing. I know that was
I don't
probably a
I
very
don't think
difficult.
I don't think I've shared that one too much. I am writing a book, which all the details will be in the book.
All right, Caitlin Connor is writing a book, and when it I
you
mean,
can read it in probably like 20 years. So it takes forever to write a book,
well,
but
it's hard, but I think you'd be able to, with all the things you're doing, you're certainly helping a lot of people, that you probably help a lot of people with your book. So on that note, I want to remind everyone who I'm talking to. I'm talking with Caitlin Connor, the founder of Be More Adaptive, which can be found at bemoreadaptive.org. Plus, she has another business. It's ccadaptive.com. We're going to talk about both of those things in a few minutes. But one of the things when I heard the first story, especially about your dad and your mom, and hey, you know what, I need to rest. How important during your whole process is being a self advocate to yourself, whether it be what you did in the hospital, maybe through some of your prosthetic journeys? How important is that?
it's incredibly important. I had a little bit of a background to know things for when I was in that situation that most people don't know, which is why I try to advocate like every kid in school should have this kind of training. They should all know at minimum first aid. If you don't know it now, go take some classes. Just know your rights when you go to a hospital, know all of that. Because even in the hospital, I got a nurse that wasn't great. And she left me in urine. She was just completely rude. It was a whole thing. And I knew enough that I could call in the charge nurse and say, hey, I don't want that nurse again, give me somebody else, to make sure I was being taken care of. And I was a very good patient. Even though I had an external fixator on my leg, because even though I am an amputee now, there was a period of reconstruction. They were trying to reconstruct it and debride it of gravel and things. So I went through 6 reconstructive surgeries. And so in that time period, I still had an external fixator on. Some people know it as a halo. And so, I have road rash all over my face and my arms and my other leg. And, I had to go to the bathroom on a bedpan. And so what I would do is I would take one arm and lift myself opposite the good leg or better leg. And then the other arm was for cleaning myself. So I was basically on one arm and one leg, holding myself up, hovering over a bedpan to go to the bathroom, cleaning and taking care of myself, and continuing to hold myself until a nurse could take the bedpan away so they wouldn't have to do, the other parts, right? So I was trying to be as good of a patient as possible. And, then I had a nurse that, despite how I was being okay, she was not. And, I was, they were asking me what my pain level is. And I'm like, it's a 10. And I would say it just like that. I wouldn't be yelling or crying or screaming. I'm like, this is the worst pain of my life. I could die. That was my 10. Right. And so, she's like, look at you. You should be a 10. And I'm like, can we like not? What, what is this? Like, I almost died. Can we not have attitude about it? Like, I'm sorry that you have to do your job. Well, and then I came back, a couple months later for a follow-up appointment with my doctor, and I saw her in the hallway. There's not a chance that she remembered that she'd worked with me. And I just remember seeing her looking down and so angry and disgruntled. And I was like, you know what? It's not worth me to really hold on to that against her, because clearly, she's got her own things going on in her life that she can't walk down a hallway and rest for a moment. So it became an important lesson for me of letting go of that interaction, but it's still important to advocate for yourself in the process when something's happening. I've had to advocate through doctors, through my prosthetic companies. I've had to really kind of stand up for myself. I've had to learn, I've had to study. So yeah, you have to do all of the above. You got to do the work.
Yeah, maybe that person wasn't in the right career. It certainly sounds like
Yeah,
whatever's going on.
I have
That's
a feeling she would have rather been somewhere else, but so would have I.
yeah, exactly. So going through maybe the next phase, obviously you needed the recovery, you found out you were pregnant. Then how did the prosthetic journey for you start? How did it go? What were your thoughts going in as opposed to what reality was?
So I wasn't even thinking prosthetics at first. I mean, I was just like, all right, heal. That was the process, right? I had no experience being an amputee before, being even around amputees before, so it was brand new for me. And I was like, okay, get out of the hospital. That's goal one. Get out of the hospital and heal. And at the end of it, I had some great people come in that were from a prosthetic company to say, here's what you got to do to heal your limb. Just simple advice. And yeah, they were an important part of that journey. And I was their first pregnant patient.
Yeah.
And it was the first time they had somebody who was not only pregnant, but also pregnant while being a new amputee. So it took me 2 years to get into a permanent prosthesis because I gained 62 pounds while I was pregnant. Um, I lost a lot of weight when I was in the hospital. I mean, I probably was under 100 pounds after just everything. And so then I gained 62 pounds, and then you have a baby, and then that weight comes off, and then your body's starting to regulate. Not only from amputation, it takes at least 2 years to regulate from cutting a bone and changing tissue that was one way, and now it's not that way, right? But then you add pregnancy to it, it's a whole other thing because then your body's healing in that way too. And yeah, I got into my first prosthesis. The accident was end of May. First prosthesis came around, I don't know, November-ish. So it was temporary, right? Everything was
Yeah.
temporary about it. I never got out of the plexi plastic, essentially. And then I took my first 3 steps unassisted, and I was so proud, and then it cracked.
Oh,
And then I had to take it off because I could tell immediately that it didn't fit right and it was harming the limb, just listening to the body a bit. And so I went back to my wheelchair and, was making dinner that day, and I got out to grab some napkins, and it was a tiled floor, and the wheelchair rolled away, didn't have any brakes. And at that point, I was in my 3rd trimester, so extremely pregnant. And it was, okay, I'm either gonna fall on my butt or fall on my leg, and I ended up falling on my leg and re-broke my leg.
oh, wow.
And so then it was another 6 to 8 weeks of healing, and basically stayed in a wheelchair until the end of pregnancy, and, almost died during pregnancy. It
Wow.
and, you know, my kid stayed in an extra 2 weeks. I was induced, and it was still a 32-hour labor. And then I had an 8.5-pound baby, and it was great. And then her newborn screenings came back and said that she had severe combined immune deficiency, which is sometimes known as bubble boy syndrome. And I was like, okay, great. Now she's got to live in a bubble. And so for a month, we had to isolate her from everyone and do all kinds of testing. And x-rays on a newborn is really sad, painful to have to watch to hold a child down. That was hard. And then you add to it that my mother-in-law was going through chemo and radiation, and she just wanted to hold the baby, and she couldn't. So she wasn't allowed to with radiation. And so then it got to a point where she could. And she did. She got to see her, and she ended up passing away right around the 6-month mark of her birth. So she passed away, and then my mom got cancer, and the worst kind of leukemia, but she lasted for about 2 years with it. And yeah, I mean, it took us a long time to get to a point of healing, and our marriage fell apart, and I got laid off from work. I was working oil and gas tanked. And it sounds like, the employer's being, whatever, but actually my boss then was amazing. She was trying to help me out. Um, she knew that if she got laid off too, that she couldn't protect me. So it was kind of just a timing thing. It sounds worse than it is, but it really wasn't. Um, and so then I was a stay-at-home mom for quite some time because it was all, all of my income would have gone to childcare anyways. I didn't make very much. And that was, years back. So it's even less now if you think about it. But and so yeah, then I started getting into sports. That started really changing me a
Yeah,
lot.
you go to the. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to ask, guys. That's part of what I want to talk. You got into a couple different things. Well, many different things is probably better, but sports and modeling, if I'm not mistaken. So those are two things that I mean. I'm sorry, but I just listened to that whole story with your mom, your mother-in-law, what you had to go through with your baby, yourself. That is so much to take in. Congratulations on everything you're doing now, but I'm sure there was very difficult times. How did the athletics come into play, mentally as physically, even and mentally as well?
Yeah, and sports and modeling were not things I did before. Um, nor were they things that I thought I could do before losing a leg. Growing up, I was never very good at sports, and I wasn't really in an environment for practicing or, my dad grew up with a video store, and that was what we did. We worked the video store and we raised animals out on our farm, essentially. And so that was so distant to me. It was not even a thought in my mind. And then the prosthetic company I was with at the time um, told me about the Challenge Athletes Foundation that, oh, you can get a grant to cover a running prosthesis. And it was so far beyond me to think about sports competitively then that I was like, sure, I could run away if somebody chases me, but then I would have to change my leg. So I'd have to stop, change my leg into a running blade, and then go and proceed, pause, pause, then play. Now chase me. That's so so what it's like to be brand new as an amputee and have no idea what it's like, right? And yeah, so they had a 5K and they invited the patients out to the 5K. They covered the 5K cost, and it was just like a community thing that we could do. And I pushed my kid in a stroller in my first 5K, and I set my first goal, and it was just, I'd like to finish a 5K in under an hour. And I had no idea that that was actually quite achievable. It's literally a walking pace. And I mostly walked because I knew nothing about atrophy. I didn't didn't know I needed to replace all the sweat with more water, had no idea. So, I'm shrinking in my prosthesis, asking a fellow amputee running by if they have an extra sock I can have. And yeah, then I finished, and then it was okay. Well, that's the worst I can do, right? So the next year I came back and I did the same race, um, just myself this time, fully running, and I did it in 31 minutes. And that was just the difference of having time to heal and to train and to understand something a little better. And then that turned into, okay, well, the Challenge Athletes Foundation has their best day and try, which is actually either coming up or just happened. And it's a relay race, so you can bring your buddies. And so I had two other friends at the prosthetic company, and we fundraised and we went to the race. And I got stuck with cycling, which I knew nothing about, because I couldn't swim and I wasn't as new of a I was too new of a runner to take on that distance. So I took on probably the most expensive part of the sport. And yeah, first day on the bike, I got real cocky and decided I want to ride around my gym and stop my bike right in front of a friend and be like, ooh, I can ride a bike. And I did, but I was clipped in and I didn't know how to unclip my prosthetic yet. So I stopped, but I also started falling to my prosthetic side.
Oh.
And I put out my arm and I broke my ulna day one on the bike. So I lost like 3 months of training time, and I showed up to San Diego without a clue of what to do, terrified of being on a bike, not only because I had already fallen on a bike and hurt myself, but because this would be the first time I was really operating two wheels. Because when I was in the motorcycle accident, I was passenger. So I wasn't operating, right? And and he did everything he could in the accident. This was not his fault. Yeah, I actually had a family member that I had no idea was messaging him and telling him it was all his fault. That's not true at all. It's yeah, just add more drama to
Yeah.
it, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I showed up to San Diego, and old Travis Ricks from Challenge Athletes Foundation said, "Hey, do you want a cycling guide?" And I'm like, "What's that? And why do I need it?" And he's like, "Let me just get you a guide." And he brings up this guy named Chuck. And Chuck's done this race a million times. And he's like way too alert at 5 in the morning for somebody who's terrified to be there. And Chuck's just like, ah, da, 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 asking me all my story. And I'm just like gripping my bike, and we're not even started yet. And that ended up being probably the best thing that could happen, was just like getting on a bike, doing something you're terrified of. I fell. I almost got hit by a bus. I fell in an intersection later on after that. We had like all the types of weather. I did it with like a water bottle and like a pack of chews, and it was 44 miles of San Diego hills.
Wow.
And so this was this concept of, okay, I can't do it any worse, but maybe don't do what I did, guys, if anyone's listening. So yeah, I finished and I was second to last for the entire bike ride, only because Chuck let me go before him. And I had the ugliest finishing photos, just like this gross crying face. But then I was like, okay, well, now I want to actually try. Now I actually want to do better. And so then I started racing and training. And by the third race, I qualified for the Paralympic trials.
Wow.
And that by then I had done full triathlons. I was asked to be on a show called This Time Next Year. And you're supposed to set a goal that you would achieve in a year. And mine was to do one full triathlon by myself. And by the time I came back the next year, I had showed up and I had 7 triathlon medals and like all these obstacle course racing medals and all the track and field medals. I had so many medals I had to put some down because it was too loud for the microphones. And so I was like, okay, we get the idea from these handful of medals that it was more than achieved. So yeah, I just started giving myself a chance to try new things. And so I wanted to try all sports. I did everything. I became the first female amputee boxer in the US.
Nice.
And we got to have a real fight, not full fight. They wouldn't give us a full fight because our weight difference was too big.
Okay.
But we got to fight. I got my 3 minutes in the ring. We beat each other up and gave each other a hug after. It was great. And then, I've done figure skating and I've worked on developing speed skating for para athletes, and that one's still coming along. But
Cool.
yeah, I just wanted to do everything.
In that first race, when you said you had that ugly crying face coming across the finish line, was that because of joy and happiness, because of accomplishment, or because you were just flat out so
It
tired?
was everything. I was
Yeah.
exhausted. I was physically exhausted, but I was so glad to be done. So, but also really proud of going out, doing something, completing it.
Yeah.
Something about completing it was important to me because there were several moments where I could have quit. And the truck was cleaning up all the aid stations after me, and it was basically the sweeper that was chasing me up the hill where I'm trying to run away from this truck, right? So yeah, I mean it was everything, and it was gratefulness to the friends that had come along and helped me get there, and different brands had sponsored bikes and gear, and my prosthetic company had worked really hard to help me out. And so yeah, I just was proud, but all the other emotions really were taking over too. It's just it couldn't contain what I was feeling. And my body was literally shaking. I was kind of afraid to move because I couldn't get off the bike because everything felt so weak. So
Yeah.
somebody had to kind of like hold me for a second. I was gonna collapse. My legs were just jello.
How important is it to have goals then? And during your recovery, which or maybe even to this day, I think I still have goals. So, how important are those goals?
I think it's essential to life. I mean, I didn't really know how important they would be until I went through these experiences and set a goal with intention, right? With my intention, not somebody else's intentions,
Wow.
right? And I think that was really important too. And setting something, even if I didn't know it was achievable, that it was something achievable because halfway through a goal, that's usually a make or break point where you're like, I don't know, man. I set too high of a goal, or it's not a realistic timeline, or whatever it might be, or I don't have enough support, whatever that might look like. But if you can just keep inching closer to the end of that goal, then it starts it starts to look closer to the end than it does the beginning, and that's where you start getting closer to succeeding.
And it seemed like you had little victories in there, and little victories I would imagine for mentally are also important to keep moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, when I was riding the bike and I was learning how to shift on course. Chuck, my bike guide, was going, "Hey, you got another gear you could use. You're working harder than you should." Like I'm going, "Oh yeah, how do I shift?" Like I'm learning in the flesh. And there was a moment where we started going downhill and I started getting into an aero position. I was getting real low and tight to the bike and getting comfortable in that uncomfortableness and sitting there and going, "Oh my gosh, this feels great." But looking at the side going, "Well, I could die if I flip off that ledge." Or, "Well, at least I know how to roll because I rolled pretty great in the accident." So these are all the thoughts that are going into my head. And that's trauma, right? But it's like that's trauma and that's grief. And that's completely normal. And people don't talk about it in that way, which is kind of a loss because we all go through trauma and we all go through grief at some point in our life. It's not if, but when. But if you don't talk about it before you get to that point, you aren't really set up with the tools for success to deal with it, right? I mean, everybody goes through something in their life where they feel lost. And if you don't know that that's normal, then it makes it that much worse.
Very well said. I just want to remind everyone, because we're going to talk about some goals that you have now. You're be more adaptive. We'll talk about that now. But in case people don't read the description, which sometimes I don't, I want to remind everyone I'm talking with Caitlin Connor, the founder of Be More Adaptive, that can be found at bemoreadaptive.org plus ccadaptive.com. So let's talk about the goals and some of the things you're doing now with Be More Adaptive. As a matter of fact, I'm going to read the mission. I did this earlier this year because I found Be More Adaptive, and I was just like, oh, I'm so impressed with everything you're doing. I said, I decided to talk about it on a podcast. And that's why I'm so glad you reached out and actually get to have the founder on. This is fantastic. But I'm going to read the mission. Help provide accessible disability resources, enabling people with disabilities globally to lead fulfilling, sustainable, and productive lives. What was your thought process behind that? Was there something missing that you thought, hey, here's what we need to do, and I want to do it?
When I started getting into adaptive sports and I started needing more, I started needing funding for travel, for nutrition, for training. And I had the grant from Challenge Athletes Foundation to cover a prosthesis, but I didn't have the rest of the pieces of the puzzle. And sports are expensive, right? They're expensive, but they're also very necessary for a healthy lifestyle. I mean, the way that my mental health improved by taking part in sport and community was substantial. But, most of the time, at least in the US, we aren't really setting people up for success to be healthy in that way. Just because, well, we don't have to go in the health system, but but
We
yeah,
can if you
so
like.
probably probably needed a whole other episode
Yeah,
for
we'll
that.
do another episode.
But yeah, so I started seeing the benefits of being involved in sport. And I started getting to know all of the different nonprofits out there that, supply grants or some sort of assistance in whatever way, which was a whole new world for me. I was 24 in the accident, which is if you're 24, you're still young. You don't know, kid. But I'm 35 now. I'm still young. I still don't know, kid. But but yeah, so I started looking at all the different assistants out there and started going, well, I kind of need more help. I can't really afford this. I'm not making anything. You know, I was just getting started into marketing and working under a boss that wasn't very great. I was kind of doing all the work for half the pay. And so live and learn, guys. Live and learn. But yeah, I started realizing I needed assistance. And that kind of looked like assistance through, you know, multiple organizations. But what I started to find was they're extremely competitive in the sense of they compete with each other to a point of toxicity. So you might get a grant from one org and you give them some social media shout out, you create content, and as a new person to that org, you feel so driven to have to create a ton of content. And you feel like I have to do more. I'm not giving enough back for whatever dollar amount they give you, right? But that can be toxic because you don't understand just how valuable your time is too. Yeah, like give something back to the org, give them a shout out, make sure you thank them, sure. But if that's all your identity is becoming, that's where it becomes toxic.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
so then I would start looking, okay, well, I got to work with another org because I need to cover some other aspect of life, right? Well, they don't like sharing people and they don't like sharing the spotlight, and it's kind of subconscious. It's not like they're actually saying, "No, don't go look at this other org," right? But they put that pressure on we'll say the end users, the community, right? They put that pressure on you to only stay with that org because they feel like, "Oh, I can't share my people." But what ends up happening is your person who comes for assistance can't continue doing the things they need because life is expensive and only more so recently, right? So then either they drop out completely of whatever that action is, or they leave the org because they feel so much pressure from them that it becomes too toxic. Well, and that hurts the org side, right? So it's just something I started to seeing that was super imbalanced. And I was like, it doesn't have to be this way, it if there's more sharing in a sense, then it just means they're able to reach new people, right? And if they reach new people, they reach new sides of the world. So I started creating, um, I created a group, and it was a really long name back then. It was called the World of Adaptive Sports and Fitness. And it really only pertained to sports and fitness and just adaptive sports. And it was mostly friends I'd met while racing and community I'd found online. And so we would share grants and event races and things like that that we could go take part in. It was that simple. And then I started realizing, oh, this needs to be more than just my friends. And so we'd let in new people. And then I realized, oh, it should be more than just sports, because disability is not just sports, right? Because I was starting to really kind of come into an understanding of what disability was for me, because I had other disabilities before that I'd never really acknowledged, just because that's kind of the society I was brought up in, to the, oh, let's just pretend it's not there,
Mm.
and you'll be fine, kid. But sometimes you need to acknowledge things, you need to address them, and sometimes you need assistance. And so that was how Be More Adaptive got started. Be More Adaptive was officially created in 2018. The social media group where we kind of all the buddies hung around and shared stuff was 2016. So we had a good 2-year run of kind of building membership. And then, we started creating partners and sharing other events and moving beyond sports and going, okay, well, what about disability rights? What about food assistance? What about clothing? Like every other life topic you could imagine. And that was the start, the little glimmering start of what Be More Adaptive was back then and what it was becoming for today. Now it's completely a monster. I've developed a monster in my head. But yeah,
But a good monster. And I was wondering, as you were telling your
monster.
own story, especially the part where you were in a wheelchair for a very long time, did that also feed into be more adaptive, to be more than just sports and maybe even beyond the limb loss community?
Yeah, and actually it might have been fashion that started showing me that,
Okay.
because I got invited to walk on LA Fashion Week for an adaptive designer as a Blade Runner. They wanted Blade Runners to shut down LA Fashion Week dancing. And I was like, okay. And I had never thought about fashion as a reality. I remember like as a kid watching like the Victoria's Secret angels going, oh, that'll never happen. Which it still hasn't. Hey VS, hit me up. But so um yeah, it was kind of an unexpected invite. And I got out there and I just felt really natural with a crowd watching me make silly dance moves. And they weren't the best dance moves, but it just was. I was comfortable in that uncomfortable moment, and I think a lot of the months and years before that had kind of really fed into that. To going, well, who's it to you? Like I'm just gonna be me. And so then it started turning to an actual career. I started looking into acting and modeling, and I did C9 Champions with Target, and then I did Comcast, which never aired. That one broke my heart. But because COVID happened, it was supposed to be for COVID during the 2020 Paralympics.
Hmm.
And then that got pushed back. And it got pushed back so far, they're like, well, the world's changed. We're going to change our commercial setup. So yeah, then it started turning into real acting modeling. And then I, got picked up with a talent agency. And now I actually help that talent agency to look for talent that's overlooked, right? Really trying to represent all of us in
Hmm.
media and not just some of us. So, I mean, before the accident, I would have never been picked as a model. A brunette white woman, that's dime a dozen. And I'm not anything special in my opinion when it comes to the appearance or anything, but then you chop a leg off, suddenly I'm different. Like, so yeah, I mean, I did see that as an opportunity to kind of stand out and push push the envelope, right? To get in that industry and say, look, you're missing out on something. And I'll go up to advertisers and say, you know how many people stare at me? I'm a walking billboard, buddy. Like And it makes
Absolutely.
them think. It's like, why would you skip something like this? We can change how people look at things, and we do gain attention. Might as well pay us for it.
Do you use CC Adaptive to help that agency? Is there a tie-in there?
So CC Adaptive is just kind of like my general marketing. So I do help market with that agency there. Um, but yeah, over the past year, I've moved a little further away from actual marketing and more towards consulting, just because it's been like 8 years of trying to get the platform built, and COVID really slowed me down.
Yeah.
But now it's like, okay, if I don't get this built, it's kind of now or never. Like you lose steam sometimes when you're creating things. And but something always pulls me back to this one. Like I cannot get away from this concept, and I don't want to. That I want this to be what I do. Uh, but man, the last 5 years have really tried everyone's patience.
Well, it looks like you got like you were saying, a tremendous head start. I'm looking at your website now. There's a lot of stuff there already. And I know there's a vision for it to be bigger as well, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and so I mean, this has been many, many years of building partnerships and finding out what the community needs from the community mindset first, instead of, well, let me create something and not actually ask you if it's something you want, right? So Be More Adaptive exists because all these different resources exist and we want them to exist.
Yeah.
So if people don't find out about them, they struggle and they fall apart, and then we lose a resource, and that's not great. Then somebody else has to start a resource again later. And that costs time and money, and it's going to, there are ways that we can improve what already exists and utilize what already exists in an accessible ecosystem like this. Um, it just takes somebody who's willing to look at it kind of all as one big picture. And so that's what I started trying to do. And I worked with the Colorado School of Mines 5 years ago, actually, 5 years ago, August. And they put Be More Adaptive up as a project for their students to work on. So they were going to start by helping build this database. And then COVID hit and I lost my students. And then when that happened, I got teachers because they were also out of school, which was great. So within a month, we gathered 75,000 lines of resource data.
Wow.
Not sorted. It's not
Yeah.
put together yet, but the data was collected, and that was really important. And that wasn't even everything. That was just wheelchairs, walkers, amputee resources, blind, deaf, hard of hearing, and maybe one other category I'm forgetting. And just those little things. That's not counting illnesses or, um, different types of diseases, temporary versus long term, everything you can think of, right? So there's so
Yeah.
much out there. But that was a starting point, and it was really important. And so, we had that, and now we are at the point where we've started working with a major tech company, which I can't say yet, but to basically remove the big jump of building the first version of the platform where it's actually accessible to the public, not just a private version.
Yeah.
So that's the next step, is really, really getting it up there where the public can use it and making it global, not just US.
Yeah.
So that anywhere in the world you could put in your location, type of disabilities you're looking for resources for, and the resources. And resources can be endless. It's anything from your hospitals and rehab facilities to adaptive clothing to sporting orgs to equipment, you name it. Support groups, podcasts will be one of these resources.
I don't know of any of those though.
And yeah, you don't know any? No, let me know if you find some.
I will.
But yeah, having information in one place that we can actually access, and also have the choice to choose the things that work best for us.
I'm excited to see this come to fruition. I mean, what a great idea. And no doubt with you being the power behind it, it will happen.
It has to. It's been so many years. It has to happen.
You
But
know,
yeah,
I did so much research on you. We kidded around earlier because we just really connected yesterday, but I did a lot of research and I knew I thought I knew what I was getting into, talking to you today, but I come away even more impressed, and the story is even more in depth than what I knew. And I can't thank you enough for taking the time to be on the podcast, and just want to congratulate you on everything you've accomplished. And I know there's going to be so much more Thank you so much for your time.
Oh, of course. And thank you so much for helping me spread the word about what I'm trying to do. I appreciate you.
Well, here we are at the end of another great podcast. Thank you so much for listening. I bet you're wondering, gosh, I'd like to be on that podcast. I wonder if Mike would like to have me on. Well, why don't you go to we'renotstumped.com, go to guest inquiries. You can find out everything you need to know about being a guest on this podcast. I would love to have you on. And by the way, if you made it this far, if you went down this far to this point of the We're Not Stumped podcast, do me a favor. Like, share, and subscribe. Especially share it. Come on, you got friends. You got at least one friend. You have as many friends as I have hands, so you have one friend. Please share this podcast. Thank you.